The ninth chapter is focused on the privatization and the concept of wealth creation. Now, please understand, earlier I discussed a concept of LPG reforms. In case of Indian economy, Government of India back in the year 1991 undertook a decision of introducing a new industrial policy. This particular NIP or a new industrial policy is famously referred to as the concept of LPG reforms, which stands for liberalization, privatization and globalization set of reforms. Now, please understand another concept of a liberalization. Government of India basically threw open various sectors wherein the private sector participation now was allowed. We allowed the private sector participation under the concept of liberalization set of measures. Under the concept of a privatization, we focused on an area where the government of India is already present in the system. That is, government of India has set up public sector enterprises or public sector utilities. These particular public sector enterprises now would continue to operate in a market where private sector is also allowed. But over a period of time, government of India has gone for privatization as a concept. The idea of a privatization refers to the concept of a disinvestment, wherein government would sell partial ownership of this particular PSC or majority ownership of this particular PSC, which is also referred as a strategic divestment, or basically would be selling off the whole ownership in this particular public sector enterprises. Now please understand, when I say partial, government might sell 5% of the ownership, government might sell 20% of the ownership. It is the decision of the government of India. All I'm trying to say is this: government will sell the ownership and still continue to hold at least 51% of the ownership or majority of the ownership in a PSC. Usually this particular process is called as a partial sale in the ownership of a public sector enterprise. The objective behind this is majorly to raise revenues for government of India. Annually, government of India provides the budget in the form of an annual financial statement, wherein government is going to lay down how much expenditure they are going to incur and how much receipts they are going to collect from the system. One of the ways of collecting receipts or raising revenues for government of India, especially in the recent times, one of the very important sources of receipts has been the concept of a disinvestment, where in certain situations, government of India has sold partial ownership, government has sold majority of the stake, or in certain cases, government of India wants to sell the entire ownership in a public sector utility or an enterprise. So disinvestment has been introduced under the concept of LPG reforms and is being used by government of India as one of the very important sources of raising revenues in order to fulfill its expenditure obligations. Now, government goes for privatization because one, the competitive markets have come of age. In simple terms, the competition in this particular market is very high, and government of India feels this particular company would perform well if it is owned by the private sector, and if government of India feels it cannot compete in this particular competitive scenario. Second, companies would be performing very well under the private hands compared to the ownership of government of India. Because please understand, usually the private sector entities are associated with efficient utilization of the resources compared to the government entities. The private entities focus on the profit motive. Government entities do not always focus on the profit objective. The human capital that is utilized will be much more efficient in terms of a private sector compared to government. So when the markets are very competitive, government of India feels the private sector will be able to utilize this particular company or operate this particular company in a much better, efficient manner compared to itself. Another very important reason apart from this is if the company is not performing very well. That is, for example, Air India, or in the earlier situation, Modern Foods or Maruti company. These were the companies, or Air India is the company which is owned by government of India. But the performance of these particular companies have not been up to the expected level for government of India. For example, Air India. Post the merger of Indian Airlines as well as Air India, this particular company or a new company, Air India, has never obtained or has never earned any kind of a profit. Annually, it has always incurred losses. And since it is owned by government of India, the government of India inevitably ends up providing a bailout package to these particular companies. So government of India feels rather than me incurring a cost to maintain this particular public sector enterprise, how about I sell it to a private sector company and I will generate certain revenues by selling this particular company to the private sector entities. So these are some of the areas or situations when Government of India will decide to sell or conduct a privatization process. And finally, private sector companies will be adding to GDP growth and also creating wealth in the system. And since I've already mentioned it earlier, this particular economic survey is focused on the concept of wealth creation. Hence, they are discussing the idea of a privatization as well as the idea of a wealth creation in combination. Next, through what measures or under what system the Government of India goes for the idea of a disinvestment? First, disinvestment through minority stake sale in listed CPSEs. That is central public sector enterprises which are listed in the stock market. Some amount of a stock which is held by Government of India will be sold in the market. And when Government of India sells the shares, they will generate certain revenues. Second, listing of CPSEs to facilitate people's ownership. This is being proposed very recently in the budget by Government of India, where they want to list LIC. And by listing this particular LIC, they are basically saying that we want to sell the stake in this particular LIC to private people or people in the market. And when government will sell the shares of the LIC in the market, the government will be able to generate revenues. So listing of these particular CPSEs is also one of the ways of promotion of disinvestment. Strategic disinvestment, where strategic ownership will be sold by Government of India, and when they sell this kind of a ownership or stake in the CPSEs, they will be generating revenues. Mergers and acquisitions among PSUs. This is one of the very important practices which is being followed by Government of India in the present times. In many of these particular PSCs, Government of India is merging one PSC or PSU with another PSU. And the second PSU which purchases the first PSU will be paying money to Government of India. Next, launch of ETFs, exchange traded funds. In the recent times, Government of India has launched CPSE ETF, Bharat 22 ETF and Bharat Bond ETF. ETFs are nothing but exchange traded funds. If you know the concept of a mutual fund and a concept of an indexed funds, the combination of both of them will give you the concept of an exchange traded funds. Government in the last couple of years has introduced or has issued CPSE ETF, has issued Bharat Bond ETF very recently, and has issued Bharat 22 ETF also. So by selling the block of the shares of some of these particular PSCs, Government of India is generating revenues. That is the root of disinvestment through the concept of an ETF. And in the recent times, there is also discussion on monetization of certain select assets of the CPSEs. Some of the assets will be monetized, that is basically utilized to generate revenues in the market. So these are some of the ways through which Government of India undertakes the concept of a disinvestment to raise revenues. Now, what is the impact of privatization? Economic survey says that these particular companies which were earlier owned by Government of India, once they were privatized, the performance of these particular companies has improved. This particular impact has been provided under three parameters. One, the net worth of the company. Second, gross revenues of the company. And third one, net profits of the company. First and foremost, what is the meaning of the term net worth? Although it's a technical term, net worth simply refers to the difference between the assets of a company and the liabilities of the company. That is, let's assume asset is 100 crores, liabilities are 10 crores, net worth of the company as per this particular definition will be 90 crores. So net worth of these particular companies which were privatized by Government of India has increased over a period of time. Second, gross revenues of these particular companies also has increased. Third, net profits of the companies which were privatized by Government of India have increased. So the performance of these particular companies in simple terms has increased after the privatization by Government of India. After this, let's look at some of the recommendations which have been provided in the economic survey or the way forward which has been provided in the economic survey. First and foremost, government could use aggressive disinvestment preferably through strategic sales. That is, government can go for this aggressive sale of the ownership in the PSEs, but it should go through the concept of a strategic sale where strategic ownership will be sold away by Government of India. Second, this particular idea of a disinvestment should be used by Government of India in order to promote profitability of the companies, promote efficiency of these particular companies, and increase competition in the market. Third, the disinvestment must focus on Government of India exiting from non-strategic businesses, and whatever revenues which are generated by government should be used in providing capital investment in areas such as roads, power sector, etc. And finally, fourth, the stakeholding of this particular PSCs or PSUs, which is held by Government of India, should be transferred into a separate corporate entity. And this particular corporate entity from time to time should conduct a disinvestment process, and transfers from time to time conduct this particular disinvestment process or sale of the stake in these particular companies and transfer the funds to the Government of India. These are some of the recommendations given in the economic survey. So this is a discussion related to the concept of a privatization as well as wealth creation.